Good evening and welcome to another Saturday night conversation here on the Tobago Inspirational Network. And we will continue our discussions as we always do. And tonight I can promise you another very interesting discussion, another interesting topic. And we have three young individuals with us this evening. And we are going to be talking about the life of a pastor's kid or a pastor's child. A lot has been said about pastors' children. A lot of pastors have been judged based on how their children have turned out and what their children do. And we want you to get a better insight into the life of a pastor's child. And that's what we're going to be talking about tonight. And we have, let me introduce the folks from Guyana first. We have Joshua Benn from Guyana. Good evening and welcome.
Good evening. Good evening. Thank you for having me here this evening. Good evening to everyone watching, and good evening to my fellow panelists.
Great. Good to have you on. And we also have from Guyana Christian Sobers. He's another popular name across Guyana. Good evening and welcome to the program.
Hi, good evening. Good evening, everyone watching. Thank you so much for joining tonight. I'm excited about what we're going to be discussing today.
Awesome. And from Trinidad and Tobago, I know that she's in Trinidad at the moment, Jasher Des Gannes. Good evening and welcome.
Good afternoon, Pastor McClure and all the other panelists, and to everybody on the Facebook. Good afternoon.
Right. So let's just jump right into this discussion and let's start by asking you to share your own experience. What's it like being the child of a pastor? And maybe we can just start with Joshua and then we'll go through.
Well, I was hoping that we could have extended the courtesy ladies first, and then we flow. However, if you insist on me going for it's not a problem. Well, good evening, all. Once again, my name is Jasher Benn. I'm 30 years of age. I'm an attorney at law and legal officer attached to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and International Cooperation here in Georgetown, Guyana. As Pastor would have indicated, I am a pastor's kid. I have been a pastor's kid for approximately 15 years now. Yeah, I believe my dad became a pastor when I was in high school, but he was always involved in church. He was a deacon, always, as I remember, growing up in church. So all my life, I basically being surrounded by church, being surrounded by people in church. People in church actually helped grow me up to the person that I am today. So I know all about the experience of being a pastor's kid. Well, for me, it has its ups and downs, but from a very young age, I learned to be my own person, my own individual. And I think my dad understood that, and he would always encourage us, myself and siblings. I have two siblings. He would always encourage us to be ourselves, and he always say, you have a mouth, use it. Persons can't beat you; they can only tell you yes or no. So I always felt that level of the level of comfort rather. I felt that level of comfort always be myself and expressing myself and not being too worried about what persons might say about me, considering the fact that my dad is a pastor. I mean, yes, there were some persons that will look at me and say, "Are you a pastor's kid? Why are you doing this? Why are you saying that?" Because, growing up, I can say without conviction that I was probably my parents' most troublesome child. Yeah. Yeah, can't say son because I have a sister as well. So I was their most troublesome child. My dad would often tell people that he would often have to leave his job to come to school because the teachers would always be calling him in school, Pastor Ben, Deacon Ben, Brother Ben, whatever they want to call him. Your child's misbehaving again. So he often, recollect that experience that he had with me growing up, often having to come in school with me. I was always in trouble with someone. I believe it's because, I always felt the need to express myself. And anytime I felt as though persons might have been doing me wrong, I felt the need to lash out, express myself, get back to them, take justice into my own hands. That's the type of person I was growing up. But, he understood it. My mother understood it as well. And they really tried with me. And I can tell you they were and they still are a firm believer of the scripture that says, spare not the child, spare not the rod to spoil the child, or whatever it says, something to that effect. They would beat me. I had terrible licks. I can tell you that. I had terrible licks. You know, I don't believe it's because they wanted people to see that because he's a pastor, because they're church goers, they're displaying their child, you know, keep up their image, but just because they wanted me to go up in the right way, you know. So I had terrible licks. I remember one time my dad even beat me in school. That's how bad I was. I'm not telling you any lie. My dad beat me in school in front of everyone, and I was in primary school that time. Yeah, so, you know, I had my troubles, you know, and I guess I caused them a lot of embarrassment growing up, but you know, they stood by me. And yeah, I mean, I had to live through that. And today I have no complaints, and I'm pretty sure they're proud of me, proud of the person that I am today. My life changed 360 degrees, 180 if you want to say it. But you know, it's been a good experience. I can't complain. I don't really know too much about any addictions or anything of that sort, or you know, because the only thing I had problems with was my attitude. I'm very outgoing, very expressive. But yeah, that's basically it.
Good. So I will come back to you, Joshua, because I want to ask you a little bit more of, I want to get a little bit more understanding of why you did what you did. But let me hear from the other two, and we'll come back a bit because you see, I want to clear up, or understand if there's a link between, let's say, perhaps not enough attention from
Mm,
your parents or anything like that, and that type of behavior because we've seen a lot of pastors' children misbehave in school. Not all, obviously, misbehave in school, and we want to understand what might be the reason. But let me come to Christian, and then we'll go to Jasher.
Awesome. Yeah, so my name is Christian Sobers. I am the co-founder of Music Unlimited Music School. I am the data manager at the American School here in Georgetown, Ghana. And I mean, I'm a musician at heart. That's what I do. Uh, and I'm a tech guy. That's my life. That's what I do. And I haven't. I'm pretty sure maybe on the panel, I'm probably the one who's been a pastor's kid for the shortest period of time because my dad has only been a pastor for just over the last 10 years, just about 10, 11 years. So he became a pastor when I was a teenager. I was well in the middle of that teenage stage when my parents became pastors. Prior to that, my dad was the worship leader at a church for 20 years, at Love and Faith Church for about 20 years. So I grew up like as a kid and even like going into my young teenage years, I was the son of the psalmist leader. And that was a very different experience than becoming the son of the pastor. And, like going through that transition for me was definitely a challenge because moving from being the pastor's, from being the worship leader's kid, where yes, there were eyes on you, yes, there were expectations, but they were not as intense as when you became the pastor's kid. I felt I felt personally like everything became elevated and heightened once that transition was made. And I'll be honest, it was weird for me at first. And I had friends who were pastors' kids when my dad was just the worship leader, and we'd go to different churches and he'd minister and that kind of stuff, and we'd hang out and that kind of thing. And I definitely had no idea about the levels that being a pastor kid involved until I transitioned into that. And, like there were many times where I vividly remember even how people would speak to me or approach me drastically changed. And like I said, I feel like all the expectations became heightened, like expectations for achievements, expectations for what you're going to do or what you're going to say, like even down to, in many cases, what you wear was just very, very drastically different. And I was 16 when my parents first, opened up their church, and I was in this place. You're 16, you're finding yourself as a young adult. You're just getting out of high school. You're figuring out who you are and what you want to do. And I found myself at first in conflict because I felt like these expectations didn't match with the trajectory that I was on initially. And for me, I was just like getting into music and this kind of stuff. So that like helped me find myself and find my place in it all. Because here we had a new church that was getting started. You've got members and again, like all these expectations. And for me, like I just picked up an instrument and I was like, I'm just gonna do it. I'm gonna, I'm gonna do worship. We're gonna sing. We're gonna just like do that. And that's where one, I found my purpose, but then also I found who I am and who I could be in this grand scheme of things. Because like when your parents are pastors, it's bigger than everything else. There's so much that is expected of them, and there's so many people that reach out to them and that they have to reach out to, because you're not their only kids anymore. The entire church is their children. And I definitely remember times, and I feel I've even said it to my parents, feeling like the focus that was on us or on me shifted, or I felt like it was shifting, whereas before, after a church service, we go do family lunch. Family lunch became something that happened maybe once every, 2 months, if we could make it happen, because they'd be counseling people or setting up meetings or doing this or doing that, and it was definitely a strange thing for me at first, but I feel like I also had like good people around me that helped kind of process me through it and get me through it. And also my parents were always very open to like listen to everything that we had to say. Like I remember telling them that and they were like, yeah, we hear you. We're gonna like try to fix things so that there's a balance there and that nobody feels like they're left out, whether it's church people or you as our kids.
Wow. That's and you've said a lot there that I want to come back to, some very specific things that you mentioned that I want us to expand a little bit. So Jasher, you got to answer. The opening batsmen have already started being in, so it's just for you to jump in now and share your own experience.
Yeah, so good night again, everybody. I am Jasher Des Gannes. I'm a second-year law student at the University of the West Indies, and of course, I'm a pastor's kid. And both men shared similar experiences to me. Joshua, in terms of having two other siblings, I have two other siblings as well, younger than me. And I can't remember the other panelist's name right now, but he hit the nail on the head, because just like him, I had to transition into being a pastor's kid. So my mother became the pastor of the church that I am at 3 years ago, which is in 2018. So yes, I am the newest pastor kid on the block. But before that, she would visit other churches and preach and those kind of stuff. So I always had a good connection with other pastors' kids. However, transitioning into being an actual pastor's kid had its advantages and its disadvantages. Disadvantages in the sense that, almost every day there's something to do in church, whether there is youth meeting, whether there is prayer meeting, whether there's Bible study, and these things are separate and apart from the normal Sunday service. So, sometimes you have a lot of schoolwork to do. Sometimes you have a lot of things going on your plate, but yet you still have to be present in a lot of these meetings, because even the church congregation might ask, okay, where's Jasher? Why is she not here? Sometimes you're dealing with your own stuff, but you have to be present. So that could be one of the disadvantages. As a pastor kid, everybody expects you to always be present and always be there and always be good. That's one of the things that I think that we don't discuss. People always expect the pastor kids to always be fine. Everything should always be fine with you because you're a pastor kid. And sometimes persons put pastors kids on a pedestal, which shouldn't be. We are normal people. And I think persons need to start understanding that we are normal human beings. We face emotions as well. We face challenges. We face struggles. But one of the advantages in being a pastor's kid, and I would always commend my parents for that, since I was smaller, probably preschool. Every time I come into the vehicle after preschool, they would ask, how was your day? I'm not just asking it in vain, but they would, if I say, okay, good, they would always ask further questions. So by the time I was in high school, it was a normal thing for me. By the time I entered the vehicle, I couldn't wait to tell my parents everything that happened, from what the teacher said to what the student said in my class. So they always foster that environment for open discussions. So, even with them becoming a pastor's kid, yes, other persons had to take their time and attention in terms of needing prayer and counseling and whatnot, but they always found that time, and they still are finding that time to hear myself and my siblings' individual concerns and needs. Sometimes on a Saturday night or evening, like tonight, all of us will just be in their room and we'll just be talking and giving jokes and laughing and sharing personal experiences. So I believe pastors, that is one thing that pastors should do, always have that safe space or that environment where their children could feel comfortable sharing certain stuff with them.
All right, great. So, an awesome start to the discussion this evening. And Jasher, I remember, if I'm not mistaken, a few years ago, I remember seeing you being called upon to pray. I don't think your mother was a pastor at that time. I think she was still doing that transition. And I remember asking myself, what's it like for somebody so young, being thrown into that spotlight? Some of your school friends might be in the audience. If I'm not mistaken, I think it was something in somewhere in Scarborough, and you were there praying. I remember. What was that like? It's one thing people knowing that your parents or your parent is a pastor. It's another thing when you are just like Christian. He's suddenly the musician in the church. What was that like, being thrown into that spotlight, especially so suddenly?
Well, honestly, what I would say to you is that I didn't. Okay, let me start from before. Probably in first form, second form, I was a bit timid to do stuff for Jesus. I will be very open here. I was a bit timid, even to post something on Facebook to say, okay, Jesus loves you. I was a bit timid. I was like, oh my gosh, persons might laugh at me. Persons wouldn't think this is cool. Persons wouldn't think it is popular. But I remember going to a camp, NYO camp, in the year of 2014. That was just before I went back into third form. And that camp had a lot of young persons. NYO camp, by the way, is the Open Bible camp in Trinidad and Tobago. So there were a lot of young persons at that camp, right, in the Open Bible circle. And there were a lot of pastors' kids and just general young people who are on fire for God. And seeing the amount of young persons at that camp, Pastor McClure, and the amount of effort that they put into worshiping God, and they just worship so freely and so fearlessly. That camp, I think, gave me the motivation that, hey, you are not alone. There are many other young persons like yourself who are on fire for God. And Pastor McClure, after that camp, I was just doing what I had to do for God without feeling intimidated. Even if I had to post something on Facebook, even if I had to encourage friends in school, that camp really was that booster for me that, hey, yes, you are not in this journey alone. There are other young persons on fire for God. And even though your opinion may not be popular, because of course, there are many persons in the world who have different views. But the camp gave me the encouragement that even though my opinion may not be popular, still put it out there. You never know who it can reach. And of course, as I started by saying, my parents, always talking to them, always hearing their views and stuff, they themselves gave me the encouragement and the booster at times. When I would feel down, when I would feel intimidated, when I would feel shy, they will always give me that encouragement.
Great. Christian, what about you? As you mentioned, you were a teenager now, finding yourself. I know that your father would be saying, and your mom would be saying, listen, you're a musician. I mean, who else would play the instruments if we're now starting? And then you also want to be a teenager. You want to get out there with your friends. You want to hang out. And then suddenly, maybe Saturday afternoon is practice or Wednesday's Bible study, and you need to be there. Your father decides, I want to do a 5 a.m. prayer. you have to show up. What was that like for you?
So prior to the church starting, I literally had just picked up a guitar maybe a year or two before, and I was very young to it. I was very new to it. Literally when our church started, I knew 4 chords. I literally just knew 4 chords. And I would, that's what we would play. We'd play every song with 4 chords and we'd mix and match. And, and at first, my parents, we came from a church, a huge church that they had, a whole band and all of that kind of stuff. And for me, I felt that my parents really, first of all, trusted me. They were like, you can do this. We got you. We're going to make this work. And they made it so comfortable for me transitioning to that that at first, like, it just literally felt like I was just excited to play. I was excited to do this thing that I was interested in. And then it became more, because I remember, I'd be sitting there and I'd look out into the congregation, 30 people, and just seeing everybody just worshiping and just entering in, because our church started really small, started I started to feel like this thing that I was doing, this guitar that I was holding, was more than just about me liking it or being passionate about it. But here was something where all of these people are connecting together, and my family's there, and we're all going up in worship together. And so I felt at first like I was just excited to do it. And that was the first year. By the second year, I started to, start working and started getting a little job here and there. And I started feeling like things started clashing, because just like you said, like we'd rehearse on Saturdays for Sundays. And, as the team started growing, my schedule started clashing with it. And I remember one time I said, I can't make it today. And literally the response was, I think we can't have rehearsals today without Christian. And I started feeling like that's not what I want it to be. I don't want this thing to stop because I can't be there. And I literally felt like, I remember feeling bad and canceling what I had to do. And I was like, this is what I'm going to have to do. And what hit me and what dawned on me, even at that time, and again, we were growing, was even though this is what we started together as a family, or we're doing it as a family, it was bigger than us, and it needed to be bigger than us. And I remember just after that, like, I started inviting my friends who were also musicians to my church. I'd be like, yo, I need you to come and hold some keys for me today. Or can you come and do some drums for me today? And even inside of our church, we would start finding people that would have that interest in doing it and get them involved in it. And then sitting there, it was just seeing people or young kids who now were doing this because they loved it, but also because it served a greater purpose. It served something that was bigger than them. And seeing them come together and do it and worship and enjoy it just became what I realized was part of my mission, part of my whole purpose here, and it kind of built out from there over time. And people just kept coming and kept being passionate and interested in it. And from there, things just kept growing and growing. So it came to a point for me where I didn't have those kind of struggles anymore. I didn't have that clash anymore. I didn't feel like my life was different from what I was trying to do in church or for ministry, but it all kind of came together and worked so beautifully. And now I'm just happy with how it's all happened and how it's all come together. I literally feel like my parents becoming pastors at the time that they did was at a transitionary period for them and a transitionary period for me in my life.
Right.
So as they grew, I grew, and what
Right.
we were doing grew,
Awesome. Awesome. All right, let me come back to Joshua, and let's develop on this conversation that we started earlier about behavior. And the reason why I want to zero in on it, and first of all, I thank God that you've been able to make that 360 degrees turn around, and that your life is now a shining example to many. Um, but I want to zero in on it because I've seen a lot of situations where pastors' children have gone off in a tangent, nowhere close to where the parent wanted them to be, not necessarily a life that exemplifies God or anything like that, or the Christian life, I should say. I'm trying to get a sense of, when you see children of pastors misbehaving, or maybe just doing things they're not supposed to do, what might be the factors that might be driving them? What might be those enabling factors? What might be the reason? So let's talk a little bit more about your early years, Joshua, in school. Why were you misbehaving?
Well, first and foremost, growing up in a Christian home, everyone has expectations of you, right? So basically, my parents, they are strong believers, and they're strong believers of the fact that God will fight your battle. So whenever I would complain, somebody do me this, some teacher do this, or whatever, it's either the teacher's right or God will fight your battle. And for me, at that point of my life, I could not have understood that. That didn't make any sense to me, to be honest. I felt as though if somebody did me something, no, I ain't got time to wait on God to do nothing. I gotta do something right now about it. This person gotta pay. And that really drove me to do a lot of bad things. Trust me. And but my parents, my mother especially is a very praying woman. Yeah, she prays a lot, and I know she would have been praying for me. My dad, he prays too, but he's more. He would beat me a lot. My mom would beat me too, but they really worked with me, and it was basically that, Pastor. To be quite honest, that doctrine that God will fight your battles. I can't say that my parents were never there for me or never had the time for me. My parents always found the time for me. In fact, that's one of the main reasons why I am who I am today. My parents really found the time for me. My dad would be at every PTA meeting. My mom would have our entire house filled with educational documentation. Like from the time you wake up, you go to open the fridge, there's a pin on the fridge with some word that you have to read. You have to just go in a circuit every day. So like my parents were always there for me, but it's just that I could not understand as a pastor's kid. I could not understand. Like, it just didn't resonate with me that this concept of God fighting your battles or wait on God, don't render evil for evil. I could not understand those things, and I just felt as though this world has a lot of bullies, and I don't like bullies. And if you're gonna do me something, then I gotta do you something back. And that was my attitude from very small, and it continued even into my high school days. I was very bad. I was very bad. I was very bad. I remember even one time they wanted to keep me back in Fort Farm because of not only my behavior, but your behavior would transcend into your educational
Yes,
criteria, educational motives. And I didn't take my work serious and stuff like that. I was really following the bad company, doing all the bad things. They want to keep me back in Fort Farm. I probably failed one or two subjects. My parents really pleaded with them. And I think that was the turning point for me. I think that point was the turning point for me. To see my parents, I constantly having to keep them or take them off of the job. I was disrupting them. They really stood out for me. They really stood up for me, and they came to my school and they pleaded. That was the turning point for me. I was like, you know what? Perhaps I could try this, this whole Jesus thing and try this whole let God fight your battle for you. Just even if it's not for me, for parents' sake, they're really trying everything. And I think that really was a turning point for me. And that, after then, I really got closer to God because it's around that time as well. My father actually branched off, and he got the permission from Pastor Lala at that time from the Magdalene Assemblies of God. He got the blessing to go and branch off and start an outstation in Diamond, where we currently are. And that time, I took that time to get real serious with God because, like Christian, you have to transition from being in the church where everyone else did everything. You just basically went to church and you sat down. And I find sometimes, even though you're a pastor kid, if you're not active in church, you don't really have that real connection with God. If you just go to church and you sit down, you don't really feel that connection. It's like when that happened in Fort Farm, and then we transitioned into an outstation, and then you had to find yourself being at every service. You had to find yourself. I had to play the drums. My brother played the keyboard. You really have to be in tune, and you have to check yourself. You can't really be doing these things, and you can't be doing these things and be a mock to God, a muffin to God at the same time. So all those things happen. All those things kind of like coincided at once, and like it really turned me around. And my relationship with God grew. I'm not saying I changed overnight, but I'm not saying it was an overnight change. But constantly, from time to time, every time I mess up, my mom would call me and she would say, Joshua, I'm talking to you, and God and this and that. She'd ask preach on me, right? And my dad, well, he would always say, Joshua, look what things people do me. And I still, it's still let God take control. When God fights for you, you've got to run and beg God have mercy on the people that do you stuff. So it's still a work in progress, and I must commend them. They're really trying. They're really trying. They are still trying with me. I must commend them. Yeah. So that was basically it for me. That whole notion of trying to connect with God will fight your battles for you. Yeah.
But let me ask. I mean, and any one of you could answer this. In fact, it would be great if I could get all your comments on it. I've heard a lot of people, and I would admit, even I have done it in the past before I gave my life to Christ. You would look at some pastors' children, and you would say, if this pastor can't take care of his own children, if his child is so bad, what can he say to me? It's clear, it's very obvious that he can't manage his own household because his son is doing this, his daughter is doing that. Clearly he can't preach to me. I've said that in the past. Of course, I had to repent for that. But I hear people saying it up to today. That pastor has no control of his house because look what his children are doing. How do you respond to something like that? What do you say to those people who might make those type of statements, those types of assertions? And do you think it is fair for somebody to say that or to judge a pastor based on what is happening in the life of his children? I don't know who wants to go first. Christian, maybe you can jump in and go first. And then we go to Jasher and come back to Joshua.
You know, I've heard that too. And my first thing is, pastors are human, just like everybody else. Their life beyond just their call to ministry is very much the same as anybody else. They have ups and downs. They have good days and bad days. Um, and I always think that it is a little bit narrow-minded to think that if a pastor's kid is going in a direction that maybe seems drastically different from his dad, that one, he doesn't have control, or he doesn't have control of his household, and that two, he can't minister or share to you. If anything, if he's going through a struggle with his family, he could probably reach out to you in a deeper way, because he's also experiencing that and working through it, and still coming every Sunday, every Wednesday, every Tuesday, and doing the thing that he's called to do. And I've seen that in a lot of pastors' families. Even in my own family. My dad and I have not always agreed. We've not always seen eye to eye. But one of the things that I appreciate about him, and I see him do this with others, people, and even with me, he's one of those people that will sit down and hear you out. I don't know how he does it. He will hear you. You will be arguing with him, and he will hear you out to the end, and then he's gonna break it down to you, and just clear the air with you. I always feel like he's able to walk in your shoes, and then come back and give you a report and say, "Hey, I hear you, but this is another way. This is another direction that you could take, or another way that you can deal or address this." And I feel like a lot of pastors are gifted in that way, because being a pastor is not a call for anybody. It's not just any and everybody. It's a path that only specific people are called to, and it's something that you're doing every single day, and you're growing with it every single day. So that's how I feel about it. And for my parents, I've had moments where I was doing something that church people came back and said, "Why you got your son doing that?" And the way he would come and talk to me about it would not be him saying, "Oh, you're doing something, and these church people or these people don't feel good about it, so we got to change it." But it would be, "Why are you doing this? What is your direction? Where do you see yourself in this? And how does this build you into the man that you could be?" And I feel like taking that approach is just something that is special. Not everybody can look at it from that way. My parents have always been supportive of all the things that I've done, and they've always also been there to kind of guide and direct my path, kind of be that light onto my feet. You know what I mean? And so when I see people try
Yes.
to jump in on it and speak on that without having the perspective of what really happens, I always feel like, man, if you only knew. If you only knew.
Great. Jasher, you want to jump in there and just share your perspective on that?
Yes, most definitely. And as Christian rightfully said, pastors are human beings. And let me go a step further and say, we all speak about frontline workers. In this COVID-19 pandemic, the doctors, the nurses, etc., are frontline workers. In the kingdom, guess what? The pastors are frontline workers for the kingdom. And because the pastors are frontline workers, guess what? The enemy would be attacking the pastor. Yes, the enemy attacks everybody. But because the pastor is the pastor, a lot of times the enemy attacks the pastor with full force. And if the enemy can't get through to the pastor, who is the enemy going to come after next? The family of the pastor and the children of the pastor. And a lot of times that is what happens. The enemy is attacking the family, the pastoral family, right? And of course, if the parents are so in tune with God and so covered, and the children may not be at that level as yet, then the children will feel the full brunt of the attack. So I don't believe it is fair for persons to just say, okay, well, the pastor cannot speak to me just because his child or his children are going down a negative path, because by doing that, they are actually pushing the child further away from God. And a lot of times, sorry to say, this happens in the church. Instead of church folks saying, okay, I may have noticed that a pastor child may have done X, Y, and Z, and let me talk to them. Let me see if I could help them. Let me see if I could give them a word of advice or inspiration. What do church folk do? A lot of times, they just sit and bad talk and say, well, you ain't see what pastor child doing. Nah, man, how the pastor child could do that? No, that is adding to the problem. As human beings, we need to be not create problems actually, but problem solvers. And in the church, this applies to us in the church. We need to be problem solvers. If you realize the pastor's child is going down a wrong path or a negative path, don't judge them. Don't try to cast them aside. Don't try to cause comments or bacchanal. I'm using local terms here. But, instead, you could be the bigger person, be that change agent, be that person that is there for the pastor's child. Because in some instances, some pastors are really busy, as we would have said extensively tonight. Some pastors are really busy doing a whole lot of stuff, and sometimes they may not have the time to reach out to the children right away. So if you are in that position, and I'm speaking to anybody who may be locked on right now, if you are in that position to help, and you are on this live, and your pastor's kid may be going down a wrong path, not only the pastor, but the deacon, the worship leader, somebody in the church, even a normal youth in your church, if you realize they are going down a negative path, please do not add to the problem by bad talking them or maligning their name. Please try to reach out to them. Please try to help them, because you don't know. You could actually help the person. Don't be afraid. Don't be shy. But most of all, please try to be problem solvers instead of creating the problem. So that is what I have to say. The enemy attacks pastors and pastors' children, but we as the congregation, people in the church, need to, and people on the outside as well, need to stop saying that pastors are responsible for their children's actions. In some cases, that might be so, but sometimes the child just needs somebody to talk to and somebody to hear them out.
Yeah, I gotta agree with that. That support is so necessary. Especially from the congregation. Pastors are leading their families, and they're also helping you lead your families.
That's
and
right.
If you can give them that support and that prayer as much as possible, it really, really makes a difference.
That's right.
Joshua, you want to add anything to that?
Sure. I would start by saying that, oftentimes God does not call perfect people to ministry. And you can check it straight through the history of the Bible. Hardly God will pick anybody that is perfect or has an unblemished record to come and minister on his behalf. He always seeks those who are going through a problem, who might have gone through a problem, or who people might say, but how he could talk to me and he did X, Y, Z. Similarly, with pastors, you have to be strong. And pastors' kids, we may not always be perfect. We may not always be the most righteous person, but God is so perfect in all of his ways that he can use that situation to show the congregation just how strong the pastor is. Because if you are a weak, or if you portray yourself as a weak pastor and you don't be there for your children as how my parents were there for me, and then you just let your children or you let your child do whatever he or she wants, you see them going on a wrong path, you know for a fact that we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities and wickedness in high places, and you allow that to take over your child, then I think that would just be conforming whatever it is that the devil wants to do. But you see, God wants you know when this happens to show that he has the final say and that all of what is happening to his glory. So when persons sit back and say, "Oh, this pastor can't talk to me, or we can't school my children because look what his son is doing," that's not the correct thing to do. Because as both of my co-panelists would have said, you don't know what is going on behind the background. You understand? Most times these pastors are there, they're trying with their children, but just to maintain their composure when they touch that podium, they have to appear as though every single thing is perfect. Even if it don't appear as if everything is perfect, you would oftentimes see pastors. I know my father does it for a fact. He would say to the congregation, pray for your pastor and pray for your pastor's family. And it comes back to that support. The pastor is there to feed you, but you as well have to give that support to your pastor, because the pastor has to teach while he is bleeding or lead while he is bleeding. And we all have to understand that. And not because, yes, not because the pastor's child might be bad or the pastor's children might be bad, means as though God cannot use that pastor to in turn help your family. Because I have seen it. Some pastors, their home is in a mess, but their church is very strong because God is still using them and they're not allowing the devil to distract them by what is going on in their homes. So you as an outsider, it's unfair for you to judge that pastor because of what his child or his children they are doing. And I can speak for myself. I was really bad. And that had nothing to do with the shortcomings of my parents. Because trust me, anybody complain on me, my parents will believe them 100% over me, right? So it had nothing to do. I can speak personally on my behalf. My shortcomings had absolutely nothing to do with my parents. And I sure it's the same for a lot more pastors' kids. I mean, sometimes you don't know the enemy attacks us so bad as pastors' kids. As my co-panelists would have said, if you can't get to the pastor, if you can't get to the pastor's wife, you get to the pastor's children, because you know once you get to the pastor's children, there's a likelihood that the pastor will become so distracted in trying to fix that problem that the church might fall because the pastor begins to neglect the church in order to take care of the affairs in his home. You understand? So
Right.
you see the effect, you see the plan of the enemy. He tries to distract you so bad in the home using your children that you become distracted and you don't have enough time to take care of the house of God. It's something like when you look at the situation of Job, you know, the devil tried so many things just to try and get Job distracted. And his wife even turned and told him, boy, all these things happening to you, why you don't just curse God and die? That's what the devil wants. When he attacks your children, when he attacks your business as a pastor, that's what he wants. He wants you to get so distracted, so frustrated that you say, you know what, God, I don't have any more time with you. I'm not going to this church anymore. It's so much attack. I can't believe I'm a pastor and all these things happening to me. My children doing this, my children doing that. I just call it quits. And that's the plan of the enemy. But you have to be strong and you have to, as a congregation, you have to support your pastor throughout it all. And you cannot be there and bad talking the pastor and pulling down the pastor, pulling down the pastor's children, pulling down the pastor, or pulling him down. You have to be that support for the pastor during those times.
All right. Well, before I go to the next question, just let me let those who are watching know that if you want to ask a particular question, feel free to just type it in the comment and we'll bring it up and we'll throw it to the panel. They've been doing an excellent job tonight, so I'm confident they'll be able to handle any question that you throw them this evening. But there are two things I want us to talk about. First, in continuation for where we were going just now, do you feel that members of the congregation think that you are given special privileges? So, for example, Christian, you're in the music department, you're playing music, and have you had occasions where people have said, Christian is here because he's the pastor's son, or maybe he was given some concession because he's the pastor's son? Have you had those types of experiences where people looked at you and figures if you weren't the pastor's son, then you wouldn't have been able to do that, or pastor's daughter, you wouldn't have been able to do that.
Oh yeah, definitely. That's definitely something that I've encountered multiple times, and it's always been kind of funny to me, because I don't do what I do in ministry because of my parents. I do what I do because I feel like that's what I'm there to do. Like that's my purpose. Like that's my role in ministry. Regardless of whether my parents were pastors or not, I'd still be doing that. I'd still be playing my part to build the ministry. And I think for me, that's something in my mind that has been on the forefront. So when people come at me, and I got to say, like, when people come at me in that way, I'm just like, but that's not what it's about. That's not what it's about, you know? And literally, it's something that I feel like over the years, I've kind of learned to shrug it off. I've kind of learned to like go beyond that and see the bigger picture. One of the things that I feel has been very beneficial to me, especially when it comes to that, is because I'm a pastor's kid, I've had a different type of access to pastors in general. When they're having discussions with my parents, I'm also in those discussions, and seeing the bigger picture, the bigger plan for the ministry and for what we're doing has been something that has opened my eyes and helped me to be more invested in what is being done, and understanding that, again, this is not about us. This is not about just you or me. This is about us taking this to those that need it, So that's something that has always been a very interesting experience for me. And I'll tell you this, people stopped talking to me because of how I addressed it. People like stopped wanting to, interact with me because of how I addressed it. I say, oh, feel like he's a big boy kind of thing. But like, for me, I'm like, this is what I'm here to do. This is what I would do regardless. I don't know if Josh or the other panelists have had that kind of experience too.
Yeah, I mean, it also before they jump in, it also puts your parent in a very precarious position, a very delicate, the very delicate balance, because now, I mean, this is your child, right? But at the same time, this is a member who is saying, you're giving your child a special privilege, and so you have to be able to strike that balance between in terms of managing that type of situation. But yes, Joshua, you can jump in.
Yeah, I can relate. Actually, that's one of the primary reasons why in the earlier days of the starting up of the church, I would just play drums and sit down for the rest of the service. I won't really try to do anything more because you don't want to be you're unsure if you try to do this, if you try to do that, how people would react. If you try to put certain things in order, people might say, don't tell me the pastor's son. You want this thing to be done this particular way, or you feel you could tell me what to do or how to do it or whatever. I know if we as pastors can be allowed that to consume us, everyone suffers. Because you have to understand, when God blesses the man of God or the woman of God, he also blesses his family. And he will impart on the family certain gifts and talents and ministries. And you are to use that ministry or that talent in spite of. And it took some time for me to realize that. But then I started coming around gradually because there were some things in the church that I was seeing that I didn't like. I didn't like how it was being done. I didn't like, but you kind of like uneasy. How do I address this? How do I say this? Because you don't want people to come back and say, hey, it's the pastor's son, this by, whatever, whatever. But then, I use wisdom and I use structural approaches, how to put certain things in place. And, I got things done. And, I never really had anybody personally come to me and say, oh, because you're the pastor's son, you feel you could do this or you feel you could do that. But I don't know if it's been said or if it has been said. But I mean, it's something that I can defend at the end of the day, because at the end of the day, what I do is not for my dad, not for my mom, but for the enhancement of the kingdom, the enhancement of the glorification and the glorification of God. I even go at other churches and do it. For instance, with this whole pandemic stuff, I had to learn how to do multimedia. Christian might have been a tech guy all his life, but I only became a tech guy as of last year, and a lot of things I had to learn, a lot of things I had to do. I persons from other churches would see and they would reach out and they would call, and I would not be like, hey, I'm just doing this for my dad, I'm not doing this for anybody else or anything like that. I would still go and do it because at the end of the day, I have grown to love what I do, and I love what I do because it helps to grow the kingdom of God, and I'm offering enhancement and the glorification of the kingdom of God. So I do what I do for the glorification of God, and who has a problem with that? That's just up to them. But it's not about me being the pastor's kid or whatever. Today, tomorrow, my dad decides to, migrate or go to another church, and he says to me, Joshua, I want you to stay here and do what I do now. I'm gonna do it. I know whoever pastoral, leadership, it has to be done because at the end, this is for God. This is not just for, my dad.
Right. Jasher, you want to add anything there?
Yeah, sure. Contrary to what Joshua and Christian said, I never had that experience. Reason being, because I have been a pastor's child for like 3 years, as I explained, and our church is small. So it's actually the reverse. When I'm not there, they kind of like, okay, where's Jasha? We want her to do this. We want her to do that. Because even while I was in Tobago for a period of time doing a lot of stuff, right? And, sometimes when we will call and say, this worship leader is asking for you. She wants you to come back to do worship. This one is asking for you. When are you coming back? Come this weekend to just do this in church, and then you could go back to Tobago. So for me, it's actually the reverse. Persons don't think, oh well, her parents are the pastors, so she's getting privileges. It's actually like they want me to do a lot of stuff within the church circle. So yes, my experience is different.
Great. Now, I want
if
to.
if I may,
Yes.
Pastor, sorry to you. And an
Yes.
important
Right.
thing as pastors kids do, what I try to do is that if I learn something, I don't try to keep it for myself. Just like Christian
Right.
said, I will
Yeah.
I will look for people and I say, hey, I want you to take over this, I want you to do this. Because at the end of the day, I don't want people to think that, I want to do everything just because I'm the pastor's kid. I don't want to like take over everything. So like I believe my ministry is just like planting something, then I move on to something else, and I plant another thing, and the church just grows like that. That's how I see my ministry.
I gotta agree with that too, because I found personally, like there was a time I felt overwhelmed because it wasn't just I was doing things because I wanted to do it, but then people started coming asking for you to do this next thing and this next thing and this next thing, and I started to feel like here I'm being bombarded with all of these tasks, and I'm very happy to do it, and I will continue to do it. But now, like Joshua said, I got to start planting it. And there are other people here in the ministry that could benefit from learning this, but that could also forward the ministry, take it to the next step, and advance it. So that's one of the things for me that I had to start doing, really starting to plant or to propagate it and letting it grow. And I found that that's been so beneficial because then here you have these other people who have these skills and talents just waiting right there for it to be harnessed and directed. And once you're able to incorporate them, then things explode and grow to a place that even you, with your skill, couldn't have taken it.
Great. And that leads me to the question that I was going to ask. Do you feel pressured in any way? I mean, the average member could call pastor and say, pastor, I make up an excuse. I can't make it today. I just don't feel like, I have an exam and all of those things, and just decide I'm not going to show up for Bible study. I'm not going to show up for church. Particularly given the fact that you have responsibilities, do you feel pressure that I can't just call pastor and say, Pastor, I can't make it today because clearly pastor is watching at you and you're quite fine. I'd share with us that aspect of it in terms of your responsibility as opposed to, the normal things that you would want to do.
I would go first on this one, right? And as I started the discussion by saying, one thing I admire about my parents is that they are always open for discussion. So of course, they expect you to be in every meeting, the Bible study, the prayer meeting, and all these other meetings. However, they are very open for discussions. If you speak to them and they say, Mommy, I really cannot make it this afternoon because I have an examination, or Mommy, I cannot make it this afternoon because XYZ came up. They are pretty much understanding in my case. Of course, if they had asked you in advance, okay, I want you to do worship for this session, I want you to share a word or whatnot, in an instance like that, they might say, okay, just come for 5 minutes, just do this thing quick, and then you could go back to doing what you have to do. But more or less, I really appreciate that my parents are very, very understanding with my siblings, and they never force Jesus on my siblings or myself. And I think that's very important. Pastors should never force Jesus on their children. Allow your children to have that relationship with God for themselves. And when they have that relationship with God for themselves, when they are doing things for the kingdom, they will do it from a genuine heart. Because think about it. If somebody's forcing you to do something, you would just do it for doing its sake, to get them off of your back. You wouldn't do it from a genuine place. So I encourage all pastors who may be listening tonight, do not force your children to do stuff. Make sure you set the table in terms of, having devotions with them, ensuring that they develop a personal relationship with God for themselves, so that when you ask them to do things for the kingdom, it wouldn't be a bother for them or a bother to them. But more so, please be very understanding, because your children, like yourself, would have other responsibilities, school-wise, sports-wise, whatever other responsibilities. And yes, you expect your children to do certain things for the kingdom, and that's fine. But please also be understanding. Don't force Jesus on them, but be understanding. Even if you tell them, as my parents do, just come and do this for a little 5 minutes. Go back. You could go back and do your studies after. Or I completely understand. You will get somebody else to fill in for you. Stuff like that you could do, and it would encourage your children. You would see your children just appreciating you more, because they would feel like, yes, my mommy and daddy understands me. I don't feel pressure to do stuff for the kingdom, and they could enjoy Jesus for themselves, and don't feel as though Jesus is just this big burden and this big stress. They would enjoy Jesus for themselves.
Awesome. I don't know, Christian, Joshua, jump in.
I gotta say, I really love and I appreciate it what you just shared, because that's so powerful and so important. Not forcing it, because everyone has to have their own journey, and it has to be organic. It has to be something that they experience and that they learn for themselves, because that's how you keep it. A lot of people find God and fall in love with him, and then they lose it down the line. 5 years down the line, they lose that connection, because they forget that it's about that relationship with him, and not about all the tasks that you do in a building. You know what I mean? And so that's so important. One of the things that my parents always did and always taught us was accountability. And I saw that even with the elders and the deacons, because they too have life. If they're unable to make something, set it up so that there is someone who is either filling that gap, so that what we're doing can continue to be done at the same level consistently. And that's why a church is a family. It's about all of us playing our roles and doing that effectively. So for me, like, if I couldn't make a rehearsal, or if I can't make a service, I gotta pick up the phone. I gotta say, hey, I'm not gonna be here. This is what I'm gonna be up to. And also, I've already contacted somebody that is gonna pick up that slack for me, because that's how this thing now is able to grow. And what I've seen in our ministry is when you do that, when we're able to do that as the pastor's kids, then it also is able to be done at every single level of ministry. So like at our church, we don't have like one worship leader or one tech guy. We have rotations. And this is how now people are able to balance what they're doing in ministry and their regular life, because you have regular day-to-day lives, and things are going to happen. It's going to happen on the fly, or sometimes, it's going to be things that are planned in advance. But you have to be mindful of it, and you have to have that accountability. And when you build that in, then everybody's able to function effectively and also stay motivated and not get burnt out or feel like, oh, it's a drag or it's too much.
Right. That's right.
Yeah, I'll have to agree. Yeah, definitely. My parents, they were never the ones to force me to do anything in particular, and I think that's why I appreciate their patience towards me during my early years. They never forced me to do anything or to be anything. So when it comes to being at every service or doing everything. I never had that experience of feeling pressured. For one, I know for a fact during my teenage years, I was never one to go to church in the night. I never liked night church. Sunday night, Wednesday night, Friday night, I never like it. And I would often tell my dad, I'm gonna start coming when you be on time because he's a man never on time. Right? He can go late and then he goes over late. And I used to be like, when you start finishing on time, I don't come because I gotta get up and go to school or I gotta get up and go to work, stuff like that. And you would always say, no, I ain't forcing nobody. I ain't forcing nobody, right? So like I've never felt that pressure, or be forced to. You would just preach. My mom would just preach. But at the end of the day, the decision has always been mine. It have always been mine to make. I never feel pressure to do any particular thing. In fact, even with this whole COVID thing, one would think that pastors would have been forcing the children. You have to go learn this because I have to still minister. Even though this is a pandemic and we can't go to church, I need to go online, I need to go learn it, whatever. My parents were never the type. In fact, I was just concerned, out of my love for ministry and all, I picked it up. And I would be the one calling them, tomorrow's church, right? I'll be there, Please get yourself ready. I will come there Saturday night, set up everything. What you guys doing? It's time. You can start on time, stuff like that. So pressure, no. Never feel pressure to do anything.
All right, I want us to end. We're going to end with this question, and I think somebody mentioned it earlier, but I want us to elaborate on it a bit. I think whoever mentioned it spoke about the fact that the parents might just be there doing counseling. I think it was Christian after church, and I remember for even my own children saying to me one time, I've seen the attentiveness that you've given. I've seen that level of focus that you've given to that person when they were talking to you after church. It's almost like, wow, what could they have been saying to you that was able to capture your attention so much, your focus, and they are watching, and they're saying, pastors after church, as Christian said, we no longer could go to lunch because you have a whole line of people waiting to talk with you after church. Or maybe there's somebody who's homesick that you want to go pray for and all of that. And children are saying that I am constantly competing with the other members for attention. As Christian said, I think the entire church now could be considered the children of the pastor. And so instead of you just having 2 or 3 siblings, you now have 50 or 100 siblings. And all of these people need the attention of the pastor. How do you deal with that? How do you perceive that? How do you treat with that as a pastor's child? Let me start with Jasher this time.
Well, I think I answered this question very early up in the conversation when I said that my parents always allow us to be open with them. And even some nights, we would randomly be in their room, just talking, just laughing. So we never ever felt as though, oh my goodness, this one has their time, this one has their attention, they have no time for us. And even sometimes, and this is one thing that I really love, you see, when God gives pastors discernment, especially concerning children, because sometimes, yes, you would have that good relationship with your parents, but sometimes you may be going through something secretly and you're just like, oh gosh, should I tell mommy this, or should I work it out for myself? And sometimes God just drops that discernment in your parents' spirit, and they call you and they say, hey, is everything okay with you? I realized for the past few days, XYZ. And stuff like that, it really is important, because sometimes, as I said, you may be going through some stuff, and although you may have a good relationship with your parents, you just wondering how to tell them this. You don't want to pressure them right now because they already have so much on their plate, and then God just drops that in their spirit, and they deal with it hands-on. So I am thankful to my parents that they always have that open discussion with us at any given time. We never feel as though we are second class to anybody, or we never feel as though we are neglected. And more so, I'm thankful to God for giving them discernment, even in instances where you're afraid to have difficult conversations with them, or you may be a little worried, or you may just be going through a lot of stuff, and God just gives them that discernment and they deal with the situation hands-on.
Right. Joshua, you want to come in and then we'll come to Christian?
Well, to be quite honest, I've never felt rather deprived of any attention from either of my parents. Primarily because of the fact, like I said, I grew up in church, and my father is a very social person, a very social person. In fact, we had a bus, and I kid you not, every single Sunday, people were in the bus. Either we pick them up, we carry them to church, or after church, we take them home. So I grew up knowing people and seeing people around me, and it taught me to be a bit social as well. So I understood his calling from an early stage, and I understood that he would have to be there for people. But one thing I must say is that he would have always been there for myself and my siblings. I cannot deny that fact. For one, he's self-employed, and his work was right in the yard that we lived in. So he was always home. Like I said, he was always at school for one reason or the other. So he was always there. My mom as well. She was always there. She left her job very early on when we were very young. To dedicate her time towards nurturing us and educating us and ensuring that we got the right upbringing. My parents, they were always around. We grew very, very close, very, very close. My dad worked at home. My mom was at home. And, so I never felt deprived. Even now, I don't feel deprived. It was even up to the other night. I was very, very busy with work and school and everything. And my dad called me. He was like, I ain't hear from you. So he always checking up. They are checking up on you. So they always find time for the kids. I must say that. And I know that I have a nephew. They find even more time for him as well. They're for his grand, so they always find time for their family. I can't complain about that.
All right, Christian.
Yeah,
What
yeah.
the last thing?
For me, and again, it goes back to that difference, that transition for me. It was very noticeable for me, the split that occurred in terms of having these additional tasks. My parents having these additional tasks than what they would have before. So I remember straight up having the conversation with them. I was 16, 17, and I was just like, sometimes it feels like we don't get to do the things that we did before. And again, my parents were like building this church. It was totally new. They're doing it on their own, and they're just like, figuring it out as they knew that this is what they wanted to do. And one of the things I remember, two things my parents said to me. They said, you see this door? You see our door? Our door is always open to you. Always. You come and rap on it. You come and whatever you need, you always come and you talk to us, no matter what it is. And my dad would always tell me, if there's anything that you want to talk about that you feel like you just need to reason just me on a level, we go for a drive. He would literally just say, like, let's go for a drive. So they even when I now started to notice that difference and I started to speak out about it, because I've always been like that, like very outspoken, and they've always created that environment for us where we could always talk to them about literally anything. So when I started talking about it, they'd be like, like, we hear you, and this is what we're gonna do to, make sure that everybody's comfortable. And that door started and continues to be open. And I always now feel like there is no imbalance. I feel like they find a way. I don't know how they do it. I don't think I could do it, but they find a way to balance what they're doing in ministry and finding time for family, and I really appreciate that from them. But I want to say, for those pastors' kids that might be listening, or if your parents are in ministry, or if your parents are just busy and working a lot, there is nothing more important than letting them know. A lot of times we go through life and we assume that people know what we're feeling. Oh, they're my parents and they're supposed to know me. You have to say how you're feeling. Communication is so key, especially in the time that we're living in. And if you feel like there's a disconnect between you and your family, or you and anyone that you have relationship with, it is so important that you communicate. There's nothing that is more powerful than that, and you will be surprised sometimes on about the response that you'll get from them, because sometimes people just don't know. When life starts to get busy, sometimes you miss these things, but as soon as you're able to zero in on it, it makes a whole lot of a difference, and people's entire perspective and perception changes on how they address you and how they deal with you, and more importantly, how they can accommodate you.
All right, guys, it's been an awesome discussion this evening. I it has gone very well. And before we wrap up, let me just give each of you about 30 seconds just to, say anything that you believe that we missed or anything you really want to share with the audience at this time. Jasha, let me start with you. 30 seconds. Anything you want to share?
I would encourage the audience with my favorite quote, which says that when you operate in your gifting, you do not have to be at the head of the table. For wherever you sit or stand, the table and room will shift. So that is what I want to encourage the audience
Awesome.
by this afternoon. And thank you for having me.
Great. Joshua, you want to jump in there? 30 seconds. Anything you want to share?
Yeah, I just want to let the audience know, especially parents who might be within the ministry, do not give up on your children. Do not give up on your children. They might be bad as me, they might be worse than me, or they might not even reach my level, but just do not give up on them. There's always hope. Once there's God, there's hope. Do not give up on them. And to the kids who might be, saying, oh, I didn't ask my parents to be a pastor, I didn't ask, or a deacon, or I didn't have to, be in this ministry. You know, take some time, get to know yourself, and you see everything will work out. God has a plan for you. He knew you even before you were conceived in your mother's womb. So don't worry about it. He's gonna work it out. Don't get frustrated.
Yes, I just felt like saying amen there, Joshua.
Right. Definitely. Hallelujah.
Yes, Christian.
Yeah, just to everybody that's listening, pastors, if you're listening, you cannot overstate the importance of just being present for your family and for your church. Like I speak as a pastor's kid, we appreciate that time that you take and that how much you are able to focus on building what God has given you to build in terms of your church and also working on your family. And for pastors' kids out there, what your parents have been called to, it's bigger than them, it's bigger than you. So continue to be mindful of that. And even as you address them and you address other people, ensure that you are continually taking a step back and looking at that bigger picture because you're a part of it. You might not be the pastor, you're just his kid, but you are a part of that process. And that journey is for you all to take as a family, as a church family, and as an immediate family.
Great. So thank you very much, Joshua Benn, Jasher Des Gannes, and Christian Sobers. This has been an awesome discussion tonight. And I want to really thank you so much. I want to thank those who tuned in for this discussion. And I want to encourage you to join us again next week. We're going to have another panel. In fact, next week, we have an individual who wrote a book about overcoming suicide and treating with suicidal thoughts. And this is something that keeps coming back to me. I keep getting a nudge in my spirit in terms of dealing with suicide. Yes, it's a Christian forum, a Christian network, but there are a lot of Christians who have admitted to having suicidal thoughts and so forth. So next week we will have that conversation. So I want to encourage you. And for those of you who, whether you're in Trinidad and Tobago, anywhere, I saw somebody on from India this evening. Tomorrow night, we're going to be having a program from 6 p.m. It's going to be a live program. We will be praying for Trinidad and Tobago. Those who've been following the coronavirus situation, it's beyond outrageous. I've seen today, I believe it's about 17 deaths or something like that, 500 cases, and that's the trend that we've been seeing. And we believe that, with the intervention of prayer, that situation can change, can turn around, and we can go back to a normal life. So tomorrow from 6, we have men and women of God all across Trinidad and Tobago who will be meeting to pray for the nation, pray for people who are sick, pray for people who have lost jobs, businesses, and all of that. So you don't want to miss it, 6 p.m. right here on the Tobago Inspirational Network. So thank you again very much. And surely goodness and mercy shall indeed follow us all the days of our lives, and we shall dwell in the presence of Almighty God forever and ever. Amen and amen. Good night, everybody. Thank you so much
Amen.
for joining us.
Thank you for having us. Bye.